Hey, and welcome back to the number one podcast in the world, the Cellarcast, episode 168. It's a beautiful day outside. If you like the color gray, the birds are chirping. And I'm realizing at the moment that I have to take a shower. I feel gross, but I'm going to sit down to record because I've already committed. And those are the sacrifices that I make for you guys, okay? It's all for I smell like this so you can hear like that. I don't know. It didn't really work. I haven't had a particularly eventful week, partly because my sleep has been really bizarre. Sometimes I'll get on here and I'll complain about my sleep schedule being bad. That's usually because I'm like, I'm gonna stay up until 5 a.m. playing video games because I'm irresponsible. But this time it was different, and I just could not understand what happened. I fell asleep. I took like a nap midday, ended up being like 5 hours. And I was like, what the hell? And then I fell asleep, at like midnight later. And then I woke up at 2 and I was like, oh God, weird things are happening. And I've just been all over the map. I've had no consistent sleep. But weirdly enough, I don't feel bad. I never felt tired. Like, I would have this bizarre, I would try to stay up. I'd wake up, I'd go to sleep at, I think, like a normal time. 11, anywhere from like 11 to 2 a.m., potentially a little bit late, but, and then I would wake up at like 2 or 3 p.m. or 2 or 3 a.m. I'd only sleep for a couple hours. I'd be super rested. I'd feel good. And then I'd be like, well, my body's not going to let me go back to sleep. I don't need more rest. I feel totally refreshed. So I'm going to go do stuff. Like, I recorded a video on the side channel, Cellar Plus R, in like an hour. I got that done in an hour, and I was like, great, I feel good. I'm going to take a shower and then get my day started, recorded that like 6 a.m. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go do the rest of my day. And then after I took my shower, I'm like, I'm going to fall asleep. And then I slept until like 7 p.m. It's like, what's going on? What is happening? And now I was talking to Kat because I'm like, it's a bit of a it's slightly stressful because, Thanksgiving's coming up. I've got stuff to do during the day. And it's nice I have commitments that I have to do. And if my body's clock is just completely out of whack, that's a little stressful. And I was talking to Kat about this, it's been a bit of a bother. And she asked if I was sick. And I thought, the last time I went to go visit you, when I was on the bus, it's another bus story. There was somebody near me just hacking up a storm. And every time, it's always someone not wearing a mask who gets on the bus, sick as a dog, not wearing a mask. Thank you for caring about public health. And then the next day, I remember waking up and feeling a little bit like, it was weird. I didn't have really any symptoms except the back of my throat, not even like the back of my throat, but just around where like the back of your teeth are, where you can kind of feel like I don't know what that part is called. I'm like trying to feel it with my tongue. It's like that little like back of the roof of my mouth felt sore. There was like a notable soreness back there. Thankfully, it didn't turn into anything else, and it didn't get worse. I think I got like some weird illness that was largely asymptomatic. Could have just been a common cold or something very mild like that, and that just knocked my sleep schedule out of whack. I think that's what happened. Now, it's back on track, finally. As of right now, it's back on track. I woke up at early. I woke up at 5. 5 a.m. But I feel like I'm actually going to be able to go throughout the day and be normal. And that's because, usually I structure the podcast with with like news up front and then games at the back. You know what? I'll leave you guys in suspense to find out how I fixed my sleep schedule. This is a great way to open the podcast with a story that has no conclusion. Think of it as like a non-linear storytelling. We're beginning like in media res, and now we're jumping back in time to a news story because we had no questions from last time. If you have a question, leave it down in the comments below and I'll get to it next time. We have a news story, which I thought was kind of neat. Steam has updated their season pass policy. So I bring this up just because I talked a little while ago about this interesting trend in specifically fighting game season passes, where historically they've always loved to rely on the mystery season pass, where they don't tell you all the characters. It's a mystery. Now, thankfully, pretty much all of those, there hasn't been a situation where a dev has done something like that in fighting games specifically, and then like the content didn't come out or something like that. They haven't there hasn't been any big scandal or anything. Obviously, people who are disappointed by the contents of the season pass, and that was actually like my point. I was asking, how ethical is it to sell somebody something without telling them what's going to be in it, right? Not lying. You're not lying. And you are being upfront that it is a mystery and that you should be open to, if you're buying it at the front when you only know what one of the characters is, well, maybe if you really, really wanted a specific character, you should have waited until they were revealed. So it's one of those cases where, some responsibility should be placed on the consumer, but, it only exists because of this mystery aspect. And then that kind of started shifting once Capcom started just revealing all their characters in the past up front. And my observation being that I felt like that was not a bad thing. It's such a common thing to do the mystery reveals in this genre, in this little slice of the industry, that it almost felt like a given. And once they stopped and once Capcom changed up how they did it, other people started following suit, and it was like, oh yeah, Arxis now just revealed, oh, here's all the characters in season 4 of Strive. And that didn't really diminish the hype of the season pass because people were still interested in the characters. It just changed kind of the structure of the discussion to more of like, what do you think they're going to be like? How do you think, what's their full design going to be? All that, So overall, I would, a strategy I prefer to the mystery reveals, personally. And I think I would wager that most people would also agree that they prefer to just know what's in the pass up front. Well, there's been an update to the way that Steam requires publishers to list their season passes. So this can be found on Steam's partner documentation pages. I found this off of like a Blue Sky post, which linked to this. So I guess I'll just link the actual page itself. So they go ahead and define a season pass. What is a season pass? A season pass is a pack of current and future content, DLC, that customers can buy with a single purchase. They go on to describe season passes as effectively being a DLC pre-purchase, which makes sense. I never thought of it that way, but that makes a lot of sense. And apparently, I did not know this, but Steam is actually very selective with who they allow to put things up for pre-purchase. So you have to have a good relationship with the platform in order to list something for pre-purchase. And the same thing applies to season passes. They won't just let any Joe roll up and put up a game for pre-purchase with a season pass. They wouldn't let me do that, for instance. They have this bolded section. By offering a season pass, you are promising future content. In the process of launching a season pass, you will be asked to commit to a launch timing for each content release in the season pass. That launch timing is a commitment to both customers and Steam. If you aren't ready to clearly communicate about the content included in each DLC and when each DLC will be ready for launch, you shouldn't offer a season pass on Steam. So essentially, as this goes on to detail, any developer on Steam or publisher who wants to include a season pass is now obligated to include some details about the contents of the pass. They say that, like, you don't have to use final names for the launch. Like, you don't have to say if something is still in development, you can be going through like temporary names or working titles. It could change by the end, but you would at least have to say the so-and-so expansion, and then include details: new area to explore, 2 new weapons, and new enemies. It can't just be a mystery. You could say new weapons. You could say 2 new weapons. They don't have to list the exact weapons, the names, or any other details about them, just the type of content. I'm assuming it's kind of it's sort of a common sense thing. Also, the release date for each DLC, which can be as vague as quarter and year. So like January to March 2025 is what they give. The season, spring of this year. All the way down to a specific date. They'd probably let you put in the time. And then there's like a bunch of details about the actual, like, that's more for publishers. It goes on to like, this is what the specific fields that you should be filling out. They do include screenshots. They say, what is it called? And what is the release? Tell players about the contents of the release, intended release date, and the publicly shown release date. So I think, every time one of these discussions comes up, there's always this back and forth that happens every single time, which is, Valve is such a pro-consumer company, and someone goes, they're only doing this because of consumer protection laws. And it's like, yeah, they are, like there was recently a bill that was passed that basically forced companies to clarify that when you are selling a digital good, you are just selling you don't technically own that, which really is how things have always worked. Like when you buy a movie on DVD, you don't own the movie, you own the physical disc, but the content, like the images and sound and all that, are technically the rights owned by the rights holders, and you're just purchasing a license. That's what it is. You're purchasing a license to view it. That's why they specify things like, this is not a license to reproduce this. So if you can buy it, but you do not have the legal right to burn it or upload the movie to your hard drive and then share copies of it around. So the law basically just clarified. It's how things have always worked. It just clarified it, at least in the US. Which for many retailers is the one that matters. So I think that even given that, yes, these are spurred by, there's a lot of laws in the EU that are pretty pro-consumer, and that incentivize, or basically forces, I shouldn't say incentivizes, enforces a lot of resale or storefronts like Steam to introduce these practices, which are also pro-consumer. I think it's also worth saying that a lot of they also do just have a lot of pro-consumer practices. There's like the loot boxes in CS:GO, but in terms of the actual platform of Steam outside of Valve's own games, I mean, people will bring up that like they have a monopoly, and it's like, yeah, they have a monopoly. It's because they're like, it's kind of because they're the best one. Like, same thing with Google. Google sucks. I hate the company of Google. But if you're using an ad blocker, they do kind of have like the best search engine. They try and use Yahoo. Seriously, try and go use Yahoo search or Bing or something. And like someone's gonna come and be like, it's not that bad. Dude, it's not even close. It's not even like as much as I hate them as a company. They do have the best one. Of course, there's some conditions on it. Like with Google, you do have to use an ad blocker. But I don't know. Steam is the best storefront. GOG is like easily the second best. GOG is good. Those are the two real players. So I guess I have to applaud them. At least, do I applaud them for following laws? I applaud them for being a generally pro-consumer. I can say that they're pretty proactive on stuff like this. They rarely have to get sued in order to do something, which is more than you can say for a lot of companies. Speaking of monopolies and stuff, and Google, there was some, I don't even know all the details on this, but Google's undergoing a big monopoly lawsuit right now. And one of the stipulations is that they have to sell off Chrome, which would be crazy. It would probably be good overall, depending on who they sell it to. I can only imagine that would be. I want to live in that world just because I think it would be funny. I think it would be great. There might have been an alternative that they were offered to, like, you can sell off Chrome, or you can do this, or you can do that. I think they were given a couple options for certain things, but that would be funny. Anyway, I'm not aware of any particular scams that have been done with season passes. As far as I know, so I was reading some comments on Reddit that mentioned Empire of Sin, the game Empire of Sin, which sounds like a total nightmare. It's a total disaster that released unfinished, and then they had like a DLC. They released the first part of the DLC, and then they never released the second one. And apparently for the last 5 years, the season pass has been sitting still available to purchase on Steam, which this new policy would punish. So I should mention that it isn't just that you have to include all the details about the about what's included. It's also that this is actually pretty important. Making publishers responsible in the case of a cancellation or a delay. And I think delay is important because canceling stuff, it's a little up in the air whether or not something is fully canceled, but a delay is much more much more quantifiable. You said it would be out on this date. It's not out on this date. What the hell? They say, we understand that game development doesn't always go as planned. If you think you aren't going to be able to release a DLC into the season pass by the quarter you promised, we allow you to self-reschedule the release date one time only during the season pass. So I'm not sure if that means like you can reschedule each individual part of the pass once, or if you only get one the entire season. So if there's, let's say, 4 characters that you're releasing, could you Could you push back the release dates on each of them one time? Or you could only pick one to be late on. If you cancel yes, if for some reason you need to delay more than that, please reach out to us directly. If you cancel a DLC in a season pass, customers will be offered a refund for the value of unreleased DLC. So I imagine that like you're like, well, what is the value? What would be the value of each DLC? I don't know if that's like Division. I'm sure with some games it's easier. Like there's 4 characters in this pass and it costs $20. That's $5 a character. Or if like things could get a lot more complicated, like parts of an expansion are delayed or something like that. So I guess that would be up to probably defined by the publisher to say. It would probably be interesting to break down how much they consider each part of their DLC to be worth. Yeah, so this is overall a good change. I'm glad that they made it. I guess it prevents certain scams, although I don't think that there's that many. Because, again, they don't offer season passes to just, like, anyone. They don't let anyone do that. So, good thing overall. And I think specifically in the case of something getting delayed, that this like prevents a lot of worst case scenarios, and also it's good for consumers to know what they're actually getting in specific. Transparency. It's nice. Speaking of transparency, something that I want a little more transparency on is an announcement from about a week ago or a couple days ago of Final Fantasy XIV Mobile. So I've talked about FF14 several times on this podcast. I love it. I think it's a great game. It's a great MMO. One of the most generous MMOs in terms of its absolute steal of a free trial. You get the first game and the first 2 expansions for free with like no limits except for like chat and economy stuff, which is like normal. Final Fantasy XIV fan trying not to shill it every chance they get. Challenge level impossible. I'm a fan. Suffice to say, I'm a fan of the game. Now, they just kind of surprise dropped this announcement that there is going to be a mobile version? Port? Remake? It's not clear. Some people are saying it's a port. Other places are calling it a remake. I don't know. They had a trailer. The trailer looked like FF14. It looked like specifically a Realm Reborn. It seems like it's not. I don't know. And there have been pretty scant details on it. It's going to launch. It's just going to be Realm Reborn, so it's going to start from the beginning. So there's obviously some stuff being made from the ground up. There is also a much smaller. There's only 9 classes that are going to be available, or 9 jobs available from the beginning, which is, that's even fewer than the base game launched with. And that's kind of it. They mentioned a couple things that are going to be included. The Gold Saucer, which is that's part of Realm Reborn, so that's going to be included. So all the stuff related to the Gold Saucer. They said player housing is going to be included. They said character customization. I would assume so. So this is interesting because 14 is one of those games that I wouldn't say it's like the most demanding thing in the world to run. But on like on like an iPhone? Question mark. That's where it starts to get like a little. If you have like a low end laptop, probably not. Even like a mid level laptop, it's a little, might be a little rough. What I find interesting about this is that, so number one, there is no confirmation that it's going to be crossplay from the way that they're describing it, and honestly from just the content that they're saying is going to be in the game at launch. It sounds like it's completely separate from the PC/console version, the main game, the existing FF14, and apparently no plans to do no crossplay that they've confirmed. It seems like its own thing. So here's the thing about this game, Final Fantasy 14. 14 came out in that sort of unfortunate cross-gen zone, games that come out around like within the first year of a new console cycle, where they are held back by the fact that they have to also typically, like, okay, obviously they want to design a game. They want to make the game for the newest system, taking advantage of the new technology, but it hasn't been out long enough for there to be a sizable enough install base most of the time, unless the console just sells like absolute hotcakes. When 14 relaunched in 2014? That was 2014. No, hang on. A Realm Reborn release date. 2013. Just around the time the PS4, the Xbone, the Wii U were releasing. I think that's a little bit before then. Those were like 2014, I want to say. But just before they came out, right? So you still have to design the game for the PS3, and then immediately the new console comes out, and it's like, I wish that there could have been timing things, right? So the early parts of the game are definitely, like, there's a lot of great stuff. The art direction is great, There's a lot of areas in, Realm Reborn or Heavensward that look absolutely beautiful, right? But graphically, and in terms of the effects and particles and stuff, it's clearly still a PS3 game. You're essentially playing a PS3 game for like 100 to 200 hours, depending on how slow you take it. And with that also comes an amount of technical debt. Technical debt is an interesting topic that I think only gets more relevant as we're entering phases now where there are games that have been live and running and updating for 10, 20, 25 years, which is kind of crazy. but that's where we're at, right? World of Warcraft launched in 2004, still getting expansions. Minecraft, technically, oh god, Minecraft's got to be such a mess, If you don't know what technical debt is, it's essentially the idea that when you're programming something, you come up with a solution that, some would say it's a quick and dirty solution. Sometimes it's just, it's a way that gets the job done, but it's not technically the most elegant. Or maybe it wasn't designed, maybe it wasn't crafted with the future in mind. Like it wasn't very modular or something like that. Or it was very limited in the way that it was initially coded. And it works just fine, And then 7 years later, you want to add a new feature, and then you like look under the hood, and you're like, you put your hands on your head, and you're like, oh my god, everything that controls this is so fucked up and archaic. Oh fuck. Oh god. That's technical debt. And that's something that even with the best programmers in the world, you will accrue over time. There are software packages that have been around for 30 years. And there are bugs that have just been around, you know? It is a nightmare to keep software functioning well and expanding over a very long period of time. This happens with every game. Like, okay, side note. I've heard a lot of crap from Minecraft players who are fed up with how slow the content releases of that game are. On one hand, I've heard the stories, and my thinking is, okay, it sounds like one or maybe two things are going on. It's either both or one or the I don't know. Some combination of these two are going on. One is that Mojang's pipeline for content development is super fucked. And they just have a hard time getting things made with the agility that like a singular modder can implement something with. The other thing is that, oh my God, Minecraft must be such a nightmare to program for. Can you imagine that? It's a game, it's coded, first of all, there's two versions of the game. One of them is in fucking Java. Java that was originally written in 2009 by one guy intended to be a hobby project, right? Minecraft is an incredibly flexible game, but also, dear Lord, I can't imagine the 2009 JavaScript that is underpinning that's like the load-bearing walls holding that game up. It must suck. Second is that there's a completely different version of Minecraft Bedrock, which was, at this point, I always think of that as being the new version, but it's also been around for at least 10 years. It's got to have been, at least like 10 plus years at this point. I'm sure that one has also accrued its fair share of technical debt. So basically, whenever you implement a new feature or mob or dimension, oh my God, they haven't put any dimensions in. They put in like a new biome once every 5 years or something. You have to be making sure that not only does it work on one version, which might have some super janky logic for the way that biome spawn or the way that mob AI works or something like that. You also have to make them give it parity across both versions, which is like, it's probably a huge pain in the ass. And now I want you to imagine a theoretical, which I don't know, it just like, it makes sense to me, of also there's some kind of bullshit coming from the fact that they're owned by Microsoft or something like that, and their development pipeline is super hampered by something. I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised. So when Minecraft fans are like, when crafting miners are bemoaning the lack of content updates for the game and how slow it is, I do feel a little bit bad for them. And also I'm like, damn, that seems like a rough situation for the devs. I'd imagine it's also frustrating for them, I would think. Unless they're just completely incompetent, and maybe that's also the case. So back to Final Fantasy XIV. There has been much ado about the fact that the game is quite old in many ways, and a little bit outdated. And in just certain graphical things, there was recently a big texture and model overhaul, which was really funny to see memes about, because I remember playing the game, oh man, like 2 years ago. Wow, time really does fly. And 3 years ago, fuck, that was 2021. That was before I met Kat. Fuck. Oh God, it's been so long. And doing a quest where like I had to get like a roast. It was like a rotisserie chicken or something on the ground, and the thing has like 5 polygons. It looks like it's from Ultra Kill, and it's just hilarious. There's like, there's like a vineyard, and you look at the grapes, and the grapes are like a pyramid with a grape texture slapped over it, awkwardly like stretching around. It's so funny. They updated those, and we unfortunately lost the polygon chicken. I can only imagine what else is going on underneath the hood. And recently, I say recently, it's recent in MMO time, 14 wrapped up its expansion. They released Endwalker, not to be confused with Ending Walker, the Street Fighter player, which was a finale to their gigantic decade-plus-long storyline. And then most recently have released a new expansion, Dawn Trail, which is the beginning of a new storyline that they're probably going to be doing until... They're going to be going with this game until Yoshida dies, which is something he's actually said, because the guy is crazy. And a little piece of speculation is that, hey, you know, while we're sliding into a new era for the game with a new storyline, a fresh start, it's also maybe a convenient time to update the engine or move to a brand new one, which, yes, would be a lot of work, but it's a long-term decision because, it's an MMO, and it's a proven MMO that is literally their biggest moneymaker. It's probably not going anywhere anytime soon unless a meteorite strikes the entire, both the Square Enix offices and the dev team and all the servers worldwide. So forbidding that, it's probably not going anywhere anytime soon. Now, when I look at something like FF14 Mobile, what I see is not just a mobile version of the MMO. I am also kind of raising my eyebrow at, wonder how much new tech went into this. Also, keep in mind that 14 is already a multi-platform game. It has perfect crossplay between the PC and PS4 versions. It was designed to be played easily on a console using a controller. And the fact that the mobile version is from what we can tell, a different game, kind of suggests to me that, well, okay, let's just say there's a potential world where the mobile game is built using something that will serve as the basis for some kind of big engine relaunch of the game. And then when that happens, depending on it's also important to note, not being developed by CBU3, which is the 14 development team. Not being developed by them. It is a different studio that is owned by Tencent called, what are they called? Lightspeed Studios. So, maybe a pie in the sky theory, but I could see a world in which they have 3 versions of the game, 3 ports of it, PC, console, and mobile. And they are all with cross-play and all that. I don't know. I could see it happening. The fact that the mobile version is going to be launching with less content it could just be that it's like meant to be a bite-sized version of the game. It's also apparently going to be free, and this is probably where they're going to jam in a bunch of microtransactions. I'm very curious as to, while they're at it, while they are remaking A Realm Reborn, how, if at all, they're going to be cutting it down or restructuring it, because I'm not going to lie to you, Realm Reborn, as much as I do like it, I do think it's good as a game. I'm sure it's got some filler. It's got, and they've actually apparently improved on it even before I started playing. It's got some filler that makes it, I have to mute a Discord server real quick. Thank you. It's got some filler that does cause the experience to drag out a bit. It's very, everything's really well made. It's just, I can feel the time constraints. I can feel the stress that the team was under trying to make this. Um, Also, the patch content gets very rough. It gets really boring near the end. And then it's interesting again. And then it picks up in Heavensward again. And then Heavensward's cool. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. I've been talking about this shit for 40 minutes. So it's time for me to talk about other things. I'm talking my opinions. That's right. It's the opinion portion of the podcast. Speaking of opinions, I was thinking, you guys know Anthony Fantano? He's that bald guy, the internet music reviewer guy on YouTube. He's been reviewing music for, has it been 10 years now? I don't know. Could very well be. Probably more, actually. He seems like, I think that started around like 2010 or something, maybe even early. Anyway, the guy, he's like the biggest internet music reviewer. He carries his opinion. Well, obviously people will disagree with him on stuff. It's music. Someone's always going to disagree, you know? A lot of people pay attention to his opinions, and there are certain reviews that he has just never been able to get away from, which, granted, he will still stand by. I think most notably that the most infamous one is his review of Kanye West's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, which he gave, I don't know, a kind of, did he give it a 5 or 4 or something? He doesn't like it. He's not too hot on the album. And that's like a classic beloved Kanye album. And Kanye West fans are very intense. And he has just never been able to escape that score. Like, people, and again, he stands by it, and he has reaffirmed that his opinion on the album hasn't really shifted, which I respect. But there's people who will just never let him forget and always say he's got shit tastes and all that. And I look at people gave him shit when he gave Damn by Kendrick Lamar a 7 out of 10. God forbid a 7. I think it's below an 8. And it was still a very positive review, a very positive review. And I think about me and how fortunate I am to, one, have a pretty small audience to the point where I don't get really harassed. I'm not at the level where very maladjusted people will devote a large part of their life to following me around and harassing me. So that's like cool for now. Hit that subscribe button and tell your friends about me so that I can get some stalkers. That is going to age poorly in 5 years when I'm still around doing this shit and I have 10,000 subscribers and no more. I don't have to worry about that. Also, I think I'm helped by the fact that my main channel, well, yes, is definitely my opinion, and those videos are very personal. Are not really framed in the same way as a lot of conventional reviews. You could definitely consider a lot of my videos to be reviews. I don't necessarily see them in the same way. I guess they kind of are. But I've never been a fan of like giving scores to things personally. I've never been a fan of, I'm not interested in just, here's a game, let me review it for myself, you know? So that means that I can also, my main audience is mainly people who are into video games. And that's probably what a lot of people, if you listen to this podcast, you're probably most interested in the video game stuff. And that's kind of nice because I don't think I have a lot of super contrarian video game opinions. Besides like the Dark Souls thing, I don't think I really have that many takes when it comes to gaming that I'd seriously get like hate for, right? That there isn't like an established, well, like I can talk shit about Pokemon games and say that like Shin Megami Tensei are Pokemon if they were real video games. Like I can make a really inflammatory comment like that. And there's a whole army of people who don't even like Pokemon, so I'm relatively fine with saying something like that. I don't necessarily believe that. I just think it's the funniest, most inflammatory way to just phrase that. However, all of my opinion, I have a lot. I understand. I have a lot of opinions on other mediums that I think are wildly like out of whack, because I really do not give a fuck. I do not care. With games, I feel like I have some kind of a personal obligation to look at them a certain way. Other stuff, I'm just like, yeah, I can just talk shit about. I can say that, like, I don't like Pulp Fiction, or I unironically like the Fast and Furious movies. And I can be safe in the knowledge that I am never going to get... People are not going to be knocking down my door and sending pipe bombs to my house for that. It's fine. This has all been a very long prelude to me saying that I don't like Dandadan. Dandadan! It's the new anime. It's the anime of the season that everyone has been talking about. It is the most popular thing in this anime manga sphere. The animanga. That's the combination word. I was going to say manganime, but that does not sound nearly as good. The animanga sphere. It's been blowing up. You've probably seen fan art of it or a character from it or something. If you don't even know what I'm talking about, look it up. You might have seen one of the main characters. I don't know. I first heard about Dandadan because I went to a movie theater and they were screening the first 3 episodes before they actually started releasing on Netflix, which is like the international distributor for the show at the moment. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting that they're pre-screening 3 episodes of this yet unreleased anime. They're doing these early screenings. And then it came out and I heard a bunch of people going gaga for it. So I feel like it's been pretty well established that I don't watch anything unless my girlfriend puts it on. So Kat really wanted to watch it. So she put it on for us. Where do I start with Dandadan? So I guess I can talk about the things that I like about the show. We are up to, mind you, I believe it's a 12 episode season. We are up to episode 7. I'm not sure if a new one has been released yet. I think they come out on Thursdays. I'm not sure. But we've, as I'm saying this, I've watched up to episode 7. And that is the part with, I would say, the second big ghost encounter for anyone who's read the manga and I guess would know what I'm talking about. So this is from that perspective. Although I think that my opinion on the show, it's one of those where I'm like, I don't think the rest of the 5 episodes are really going to change how I feel about it. So I feel kind of comfortable. There was actually a point where I was going to hold off until I watched a few more. And now I feel like pretty confident. So the things that I like about the show, the premise is pretty fun. It's a fun premise. The visuals, it's very well animated. It's done by Science Saru is the studio behind it, which is the same studio that did the Scott Pilgrim anime, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, which we also loved, and I loved the direction they had on that. What did they do? Is there anything else that I recognize? A lot of movies. Oh, did they do Devilman Crybaby? Okay, yeah. So a lot of like very visually interesting shows. Nothing else that I really know of. Yeah, that I can recognize. At least not by the Japanese names that my anime list insists on using for everything, which is really fun. Why don't they just, like, if it has an English name, just list it in English or whatever if it has a localized name and you're set to view the site in that language, the technology must exist. Anyway, so the animation is quite high quality. It's generally a pretty competent show, and for the most part there's nothing offensively bad in it. And that's kind of the fifth episode. Sorry, okay. The fifth episode is kind of charming, and the seventh episode, the most recent one when I'm watching it, at the time of me recording this, had a 2-minute scene in it that was pretty good. And the rest of the show I don't really like. So I guess I could start with the premise, which I guess ties in. So, how do I spent so much time thinking about this because I haven't seen like anyone else share my opinion at all, which is part of the maddening aspect of it. So I just keep kind of pacing around trying to think about it and going over the ideas over and over again in my head, which means that it's a little jumbled when I try to actually organize what I should start off talking about. I'll start with the first episode, which is so it doesn't help the first episode is terrible. It is terrible. It has been a really long time since I have watched or experienced something that made me want to drop it so quickly. The last thing I can think about was when I played that like Roblox graphics style Battlefield type game called BattleBit Remastered. That's the game where I took 3 steps and I refunded it because I knew it was I could not play that shit. That's another contrarian opinion, huh? I guess that's a second one. Right. So, yeah. Okay. So here's the premise of the show. The show has 2 main characters. When it starts out, it's about this high school girl named Momo, who she's a bit down on her luck. She's just broken up with her kind of jerk of a boyfriend. And to kind of blow off some steam, she's like this kind of Gyaru type of Genki girl. One of her friends is like in full Ganguro makeup, which I thought was an interesting choice. I don't know if that's a thing, like there's a throwback trend in Japan to Ganguro makeup, but all right. So to blow off some steam, she basically goes and messes with the nerd boy at school, who comes to be known as Okarun. And he is basically Dib from Invader Zim. He is obsessed with aliens. He doesn't really have any friends. They kind of pick on him, and he tries to just kind of ignore it and turn the other cheek. And he sits down and he reads his UFO conspiracy magazines. She basically like messes with him, and then afterwards she feels bad about it. And she goes to try to apologize, and she says, "Hey, if it makes you feel any better, I'm also kind of like you get kind of made fun of for being into aliens and all that. But I actually also believe in spirits and ghosts and stuff." And he goes, "Oh, well, that's bullshit." And she's like, "What?" And he's like, "Oh yes, ghosts are made up. That shit's not real. That's fake." And they get into an argument about this. I liked that. I thought that was a funny way to intro the characters. It's essentially what this results in is they both dare each other to go to a supernatural hotspot of the other's interest. So she sends him to this tunnel, this supposedly haunted tunnel, and he sends her to some like abandoned building that there was a UFO sighting recently at nearby. So surprise, surprise, guess what happens is he gets possessed by a spirit in the tunnel, and she gets abducted by aliens. And you're like, oh, okay, well, this is kind of fun. Well, when she's abducted by aliens, all of her clothes rip off. And I was like, oh, what? Huh? That was my first, hang on, pause. Where is this going? And she's like strapped into a table, and these aliens are telling her that their species cannot breed with each other, and so they need to abduct members of other species so that they can use their giant metal spiked robot penises to rape them into fertility. And the show treats this like just kind of a zany, funny thing that's going on. And it's really fucking weird. It's really strange. There are like these leering, mind you, this is like a 16-year-old girl. There's like these leering shots of her crotch because she's in her underwear. And it is so bad. It's so bad. It's bad. It's not just the excuse me. It's not just the subject matter. It's the complete bizarre tonal clash. Like, all of this crazy stuff, like the ghost that's in Okarune's body goes to the UFO, and there's this crazy Sakuga action scene, and the whole time I cannot get invested in what's happening, because the entire back half of the episode is escape from Diddy's castle. It is so weird, to the point where like the show, it's this horrific situation that the show just like does not treat at all like what it is. And it felt to me like sloppy. It felt bad, as in the writer didn't understand what he was writing. And it lost a lot of faith in his ability to do like anything. I cannot believe it. Like, I'm trying to find the words to describe how bad this first episode is. I have never had the brakes slammed so hard on something that I was kind of getting interested in. Awful episode. Just what the fuck? It's super weird. And then it apparently that's the only time that something like that happens in the show, which is like, okay, fine, sure. That's the only time that it happens. I would have dropped the show after that. Genuinely, if it weren't for Kat forcing us onto the next one, I would have dropped the show after the first episode. Just because that was such like, oh, this is like, people will, what boggles my mind is that in discussion of the show, I have seen a decent amount of people saying, yeah, that stuff is bad, and it's really poorly handled, but just like get through it. And that's the last time it happens. And you know what? Okay. I can at least respect that. What I find absolutely insane are the people who will go out of their way to like defend it with no joke, arguments like, guess you got filtered by the fan service. Huh, you can't handle some fan service? I should nail you to the wall with nails through your arms. You should be crucified. I'm going to chop off your dominant hand, and the rest of your life you're going to have to jerk off with your non-dominant hand to your fucking 16-year-old rape anime. Fucking fan service? I'm gonna go off on a rant. This is like I have to get this off of my chest. There is an incredible number of anime fans who self-described anime fans who all they watch is anime. It's the only type of content that they watch, like visual content they watch besides, I don't know, video games. It's just the cultural output of one medium from one country. But because it's in a different language, they get to act like they're exotic and they have eclectic taste. You are no different. You're no different from someone who just sits around and only watches stuff from America or something. You are no better. You are no better than that. And you see how long-term, because here's the thing. A lot of anime that comes out in a season, 90% of anime that comes out in a season is fucking garbage. Just trash, right? But there is this weird, this is why I had to like stop engaging with the online anime community when I was in high school, because I was realizing as soon as I just started like intaking different stuff, I realized like how much people put themselves through complete garbage that isn't worth their time and shouldn't be rewarded because they have to keep up with the discussion. I have to keep up with the discussion. It is so weird to me. And I think the long-term effects of stunting your media diet like that result in these absolutely fucked up perspectives on like anything. Like it's like talking, maybe appropriate for this show. It's like talking to aliens who have like studied a bit of human culture, and you're just like, what? You're not a real person. How did you form this opinion? Oh, it's because all you watch is shonen anime and like isekai. Oh, sorry. You read books. You read isekai light novels. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were so eclectic. This isn't like an indictment of the show. It's just I had to get this off my chest. It makes talking about anything related to talking about anime sucks. I'm so glad I'm not an anime YouTuber. I'm so glad, because so many anime fans are just the dumbest fucking people you will ever be subjected to. Go try to read a discussion on Twitter about anime, and how many people on there are openly hostile to the idea of just interpreting things. It's crazy. It's crazy. Anyway, I can't believe that people actually defend that scene. It drives me up the wall. It was so distracting. I could not get invested in the action. I couldn't, or the whole rest of the episode or anything after that, because I was so distracted by the fact that the last 10 minutes of the episode are trying to prevent a 16-year-old girl from getting gang raped by aliens. It is so fucking weird. So putting that aside, okay, let's compartmentalize that and say that is an outlier. Don't let it color your perception of the rest of the show. Okay, you know what? I can do that. I intellectually, I can do that. We're going to take that and say that's a fluke. We're going to push that off to the side. You know, I mean, there's stuff that is weird sometimes in the early parts of, there's like a TV tropes page for it. It's called like early installment weirdness. You know? All right, fine. So, ignoring how awful the first episode is, which again would have gotten me to just drop the show entirely. What's the rest of the show like? Up to episode 7. What are the following 6 episodes like? And the answer is that it is fine. It's fine. I have been just by osmosis, because it's very difficult to avoid discussion, I've been getting a lot of people who are really hyped for the show. Now, I imagined that a lot of those people were people who had read the manga and, knew ahead stuff that was going to happen, and were talking about, oh, it's so cool that this is finally getting adapted, because later on, so stuff happens that's really good, or that's really interesting. And then I had a moment where I realized that actually, and maybe I should have realized this from the beginning, most of these people are actually anime onlys, and they're commenting on the show that has been released. And I am confused. I'm not confused at why people like it. I can understand why people like it. But the level of hype I've seen is just, I don't get it. I feel like Principal Skinner in that one scene, that one meme where he goes, am I out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong. That's what I feel like, but I don't know what else. I don't know what else to say. I guess I could start with the main problem that I have with the show is that I am ageist. Okay, so the core of Dandadan, people are so weird about this. Weird because of what I'm about to talk about. People keep talking about how weird the show is. It's so weird. Oh my God, it's so weird. And it's like, yeah, on a surface level, it's kind of off the wall. I'd call it zany. But really, the story is very simple. It's a very, very straightforward, simple story. There is nothing that... All of the strangeness is very surface level, which I think is actually part of why it's been so successful. It's that it has all of this kind of unique wrapping to it. But once you watch it, it's really easy to understand everything that's going on and what every character's motivation is and what the conflicts are. And the themes so far are very... I've been trying to pick up on them. I don't know. Maybe it'll be more apparent by the end of the first season. I haven't been able to really grasp at anything that interesting. At its core, Dandadan is a story about two high schoolers slowly falling in love. And I just really don't care. I just really don't care about either of them. I have to apologize to my girlfriend who is listening right now. But she is like making me watch a show, which, okay, we're at the point now where she has stopped asking me what I think after each episode, and we just don't talk about it because she knows. And I've kind of just been going, did you enjoy it? And she says, yeah. And I was like, good. It's like when you have bad sex and they're like, and the other person is like, did you enjoy that? And you're like, did you enjoy it? And they say, yeah. And you're like, and I enjoyed it. That's all I want. Yeah, Dandadan, watching Dandadan is like having subpar sex. That's the title. That's the podcast title. Will that get age restricted? I think you can have sex in the title without getting age restricted. Yeah, Dandadan is like having bad sex. How do I do it every time? But yeah, I just really can't find myself interested in neither of the characters. I'm not really interested in who they are or the conflicts that they have, or I'm not really invested in... I don't really care very much for them individually or their personalities. And thus, I am really not that interested in their budding romance. There is okay, with this one exception. The 5th episode has so the main meat and potatoes of the series is that it is a battle manga, which involves Momo, who has these psychic powers, and Okarun, who has these like powers he gets from being possessed by that spirit, and they are fighting the supernatural. Okay, again, fun premise. The 5th episode is after the first major arc is done, which, okay, I find it weird that when they did the pre-screenings in theaters, that they did the first 3 episodes when the actual first story arc is like 4 episodes. Like, I think if I watched this and only watched the first 3, I would be like, well, that's a cliff. It ends on like a not even like a cliffhanger, but it's like there's another episode left to go in the plot line. Like, I wouldn't be very satisfied. Maybe that was the point. Maybe that was all they had ready at the time. I've heard about anime production schedules. I've heard about them finishing episodes 12 hours before they air. What are they, a YouTuber? What are they, me? Saying right. So the 5th episode is just like a downtime episode meant to bridge the first and second real plot lines. And it's just kind of them at school, like accidentally avoiding each other, and it's kind of cute. It's kind of charming. I think if the show was more of that to like build them up, maybe I would enjoy it. But the majority bulk of the show has been, I don't know, just stuff I don't care about that has not. I feel like we're well past the point where I should expect the show to try to sell me on the characters, and I should just not be watching it, unfortunately. Like, okay, I would have dropped the anime after literally any episode that's aired. Any of the first 7, I would have dropped it. But because apparently Momo and Okarun are literally us, according to my girlfriend, I must soldier on with her through this. And so, again, when I make complaints, know that part of this is just me venting because I have to watch a show I don't really like, and I need to get this off. I'm getting a lot of stuff off my chest. This is like a therapy session. Yeah, I just nothing about the show really works for me. It's a pretty standard, simple plot story, at least. It's told in a very straightforward way, which isn't a bad thing. It's just that the specifics of it aren't very interesting to me. I don't care for the characters very much. The action scenes have been well directed, but without care. I don't really care about what's going on, so they feel kind of hollow to me. Oh, yeah. Here's like a big break moment where I kind of knew. In the 4th episode, there's a chase scene. And for this chase scene, hang on, what is the name of that song? It is the William Tell Overture. That's the da-da-da, 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 da-da-da. It's that song. But it's like a techno remix of the William Tell Overture. And the whole time I was like, it's this crazy chase scene where they're like launching 100 feet into the air and flying around, and there's like zombies that start there's this giant crab. And I'm watching this and I'm like, this is supposed to be fun, and I'm not having fun. And part of it is this music choice is so distracting. It is so weird, like in a bad way, where I just cannot stop thinking about what the fuck is this song? It's not what I would have picked. And I could just not, it's like this big, it is the climax of the first 4 episodes of like this arc that's been built up for 4 episodes. And I was just like, what? And it was clearly like this, I mean, I respect it. It was a brave choice. I didn't like it. And at that point, I think when there's something like that, where I say, this is the show flexing its boldness, and going out of its way to do something a little unusual, creatively, and I really do not jive with it. Maybe we just should go our separate ways. I don't even really like the opening. I just don't really like the song. At this point, I'm just being petty. Yeah, it's a show, and if people like it, I would get it. This is just a very me thing. When I said I'm ageist, I mean I just find it really hard to care about stories about teenagers. It's just that's what I mean. Like, I'm a bigot, and I don't think you can argue with that. Yeah, so I don't know if I have any other thoughts on it. It's a show that I don't really gel with on any level, that I don't really enjoy. Oh, I can talk about the one good thing. So, and I guess this is spoilers. There's the second real story arc is like this 2-episode thing with this character, this sort of new character. Her name is Iru. I don't really like her that much, and she is like being followed by this ghost, and she thinks that it's caused by Momo, I think I want to say. Momo or okay, one of them. And she like confronts them. All three of them, they all get attacked by the actual ghost, and there's a big fight scene, and then they have in the big climax, Iru dies. And they're like, oh, but you can get the ghost. Put the ghost back into, you could take the ghost essence or whatever and shove it into Iru's body with your psychic powers, and that'll revive her. And so while Momo's doing that, you get this view of this ghost backstory, and it's about a 2-minute sequence, and it was pretty compelling. It's told entirely, pretty much mostly just through visuals with some music over it. No like in-scene sound, no diegetic sound. And it just tells this pretty, I mean, not revolutionary, but pretty effective, tragic story about the backstory of this ghost character. And I was like, wow, that it's the most invested I have been in the show. And it ends, and it was pretty effective. And I thought, that was kind of interesting. I think I liked that. And then the scene went back to the main characters, and I was like, oh, right. These guys. There is this trend that I hope the show does not keep up, because I think it would really get on my nerves, where they did this with the first. Okay, so the first thing is like, okay, the first story arc is about the Turbo Granny, which is a real thing from Japanese folklore. Very funny. But it's like this ghost of an old woman who runs really fast, That's the thing, and she haunts tunnels or something. There's a whole arc in JoJo, the Highway Star arc from part 4 is based on this like folk legend or like urban legend. I'm not sure how old it is exactly. There's a whole arc, and when I realized it, I was like, oh, of course, yeah, huh. That's why it's in a tunnel and all that. So the whole thing is that when she possesses Okarun, she takes his dick and balls, which is like, again, it's like a 16-year-old, which I find that kind of weird as an adult. Again, just a little, again, like when the show is actually kind of weird, I just don't really like it. And then you find out at the end of this 4-episode storyline that the Turbo Granny what did she do? She was haunting that tunnel because it was the resting grounds of like a bunch of girls who had been assaulted and killed in the past. And she, I guess, had empathy for them and was like protecting the spirits in that tunnel. And so there's this kind of, I thinking, they don't draw any attention to it, but there's kind of this implication that like, oh, she has like a vendetta against men because assumedly men were the ones who did all that. So when Okarun shows up, she takes like his penis, right? So that's like, okay, I at least kind of understand the motivation for, okay, there's like something to this character. And by the way, this grandma character becomes a consistent cast member. She becomes a core cast member. She's trapped in a little cat statue. They haven't done anything with it since. I mean, it's only been a few episodes, so I don't know if that goes anywhere or if it means anything, but there's at least like somewhat of a connection, and also that kind of explains why she was attacked, why she suddenly like teleported. That's what happened. She teleports like through the phone in the first episode to where Momo is being captive in the Diddy mansion, Diddy's fortress. And that's why she's attacking the aliens, because they're rape aliens. So, okay, I get it. It's like a sort of interesting character motivation. They haven't done anything with it. And I was fine with that, because this is a consistent cast member. And then they have this other character, this red dress ghost, this lady in red ghost. And she has this really compelling, interesting backstory. That's like, damn, I really feel bad for this character. I'm interested in this. And then you cut back, and she is crumbling into dust, assumedly never to be seen again. So, like, I'm not a big fan of, we find out the character's backstory after they're essentially dead and gone. Like, the in retrospect emotional hit is kind of annoying to me. And if that's a consistent thing in the show, I think I would get very annoyed, because the ghost backstories so far have been the only kind of interesting thing about the show to me. So, at this point, I will probably be dragged through the rest of the season by my girlfriend. I'm assuming it's going to get renewed. That's kind of the model now, is Shonen Anime moves to, they're doing like separate seasons. As opposed to just constantly running and blowing all of their budgets. I highly doubt that anything left in the show is going to change my opinion on it, which is why I felt like now I could talk about it, because it's been out for a little bit. It's been airing for a little while. Episode 5 was the one episode that gave me pause, and I said, okay, well, let me maybe the first arc is just kind of rough and boring. let me see where maybe it improves and it gets a little more interesting to me. And then episode 6 and 7 happened, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'm basically done. I don't know, like, when we finish it, I don't know if I will have any kind of a status update unless my opinion dramatically changes, which again, I doubt. Part of me belaboring this point is that I am also trying to jinx myself so that maybe it does get good eventually. And because I don't want to dislike things. Like, if something's popular, okay, my contrarianism is that if something's popular, I won't watch it. But it's not that I'll dislike it because it's popular. I just won't watch it. For some reason, something being popular, like, kills my interest. Kills my interest in it. But that rarely, if ever, reflects on my actual feelings towards the thing. So yeah, I'm the Norman Rockwell painting of the guy standing up and saying, I do not care for Dandadan. I think it's a fairly mediocre show without a lot going on, and I really don't get the hype behind it. The level of hype behind it. I understand liking it. I just, people are really into this, and I don't get it. It does nothing for me. Speaking of things that do nothing for, no, that's not fair. There's not a good segue into this. I've been playing a lot of YuGiOh Master Duel, so I'm going recently through a big Yu-Gi-Oh phase, big card game phase. I tried. Okay, so a little note about card game simulators. There are a number of them, official and unofficial, for various games. I've been somewhat interested in Magic the Gathering for a while, so I downloaded Magic the Gathering, online. Dude, I did not realize how good Yu-Gi-Oh had it until I tried Magic Online. This is different from Magic Arena. They have two competing apps for some reason. I don't know why. Magic Arena is the one I guess more people would probably go into. I just don't feel like it because I don't feel like grinding for Magic cards. When I hop into a card game simulator, usually what I want is give me access to a bunch of cards, like a lot of them, if not all of them, so that I can just get a feel for how the game plays and not have to like grind up cards or something like that. I kind of just want to play like meta shit or fun weird decks. And unfortunately, a lot of times those require like grinding for whatever in-game crafting currency or opening packs currency there is. So I haven't tried Arena. I tried MTG Online. That client has one of the worst user interfaces for something like this that I have ever seen. It is astonishingly stiff and difficult to use and weird. And I didn't even get to, also there's no bots as far as I could tell. There's no online, there's no like training bots. I just want to play like a little couple AI matches because I have never played a real game of Magic. It doesn't offer that somehow in the year of our Lord 2024. But I have seen screenshots of what it actually looks like in game, and woof. Yeah, so not touching that. And then I said, I am. It's really funny because you could make arguments about the relative health of any given card game, but I would much rather throw Yu-Gi-Oh at someone before Magic. Because Yu-Gi-Oh, at least there are fan-made simulators, like anything running off of EDO Pro, where you just get access to every card ever printed. And including like previous like versions of cards that got errataed and stuff like that. You get access to everything. And they have tons of special rules. It is a very solid, great, fleshed out simulator. There's a bunch of different AI opponents that you can play against. You can just download a deck off of a website, YuGiOh Pro, and just like put the file into the folder on your computer, and it just pops right in. Very easy to use, and I think genuinely for teaching someone the game, it's really easy. YuGiOh also has a number of official simulators. They have Duel Links, which I have not played and I've heard is a grind hell, and Master Duel, which I have downloaded and is apparently very generous as far as these types of games go. So Master Duel is the premier online Yu-Gi-Oh simulator. This is I say simulator. Master Duel is sort of its own beast for some key reasons. So when it launched, look, Yu-Gi-Oh's got a lot of cards. When Master Duel launched, it did not have every single card ever released up to that point. It had a select few, which for the purposes of the gacha system is mostly fine, you know? Like, it's mostly fine, but it has these knock-on effects on the metagame, because when you have just different cards in the game, when some cards just don't exist and others do, it requires a different ban list. When I did the podcast with Prox and I was talking about Yu-Gi-Oh, I brought up how there are technically 3 different versions of Yu-Gi-Oh that you can play that are all the same game, just with different ban lists that radically affect the meta. The OCG, the official card game, which is the Asian territories. The TCG, the trading card game, which is the non-Asian territories. And Master Duel, the online simulator, which has its own ban list and card pool. Also, the OCG gets cards way before the TCG does, so I think it's dumb. I think it's dumb. At least for the physical card game. I don't know why they haven't established parity across versions, but whatever. Anyway. So you can play like a deck in Master Duel that is literally just illegal if you go to a local game store in your area. Like, it's very goofy, whatever. Anyway. How does Master Duel fare? There's a number of ways that you can evaluate it. Number one is, how good is it as a Yu-Gi-Oh simulator? The answer to that is, thankfully, very good. Master Duel is a flashy, sleek client. It has a actually very good interface. It has a lot of robust options for little things that you would want. You know, it's not as much as, honestly, the fan-made simulators, but there is just things like being able to toggle on and off, being asked if you want to play like a quick play or something like that. So just, there's little things. It could definitely benefit from the Steam client, the Steam version of the client, having more like keyboard commands, or being able, because you have to interface with it almost exclusively with the mouse, which can be a little bit cumbersome. I just and maybe a few more shortcuts for not having to like double confirm every single move that you do. Little cumbersome. But for the most part, it's a very competent simulator. It has lots of very flashy animations. There are many cards have cut-ins when you play them, like blah, big splash thing with like a live 2D animated bit. You can toggle those to not even happen. It's a very well-rounded, good-looking simulator that plays pretty well. Visually, also, I think it's a pretty looking game. The boards are nice. There are tons of custom boards, which are cool. That's something I'm always, that's something that I wish like Hearthstone had done or something like that. Maybe Magic Arena does it, but in Master Duel, you can get custom boards. So there's all these different board types with different looks and aesthetic, essentially skins for your board, and each player plays with their own skin. It doesn't apply to the whole game, or to the whole field, just your side, which is kind of fun. So I think in a lot of objective ways, it's a very well put together game that is separate from because it's based on an existing game. You kind of do have to evaluate it separate from the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, which you can have wildly different opinions on. But I think anyone would agree Master Duel as a game itself is pretty good as an adaptation of a physical card game. It's also worth talking about the, I want to say gacha elements, but technically gachas were just a copy of what card games already did. They show you the rates for all of the cards. They show you all of the cards that are available in packs. It's got an interesting, kind of funky system. Essentially, when you start out, you only have access to pull from packs of... So the packs you can pull from are limited to essentially the pool of all cards. And then when you pull from packs using your premium currency, the cards that you discover and also the cards that you craft, because there is crafting, are mostly, not all of them, but many of them are sorted into a gajillion different themed sets. So for instance, there's a whole theme based on the hero cards and like stuff that relate to it's called like, I don't know, heroes and villains or something. There's another one that's themed all around the space and spaceship themed archetypes, right? And that's called like Galactic War or something. And those cards will be in those packs. So if there's a card, if you're playing a certain deck and there is an archetype that you're basing your deck around, that's going to be probably going to be in a certain pack, and you can just pull specifically from that, which if you're focused and you know what you're pulling for, honestly, in my case, having spent $0, I have like 2 complete decks. I have 2 complete decks of cards just using the currency that they give you, as well as crafting. It is, I think, for what it's worth, maybe if you want to get a billion different decks and all that, yeah, I think at that point it's going to start getting expensive. But being free to play so far has been fine. Also, they just hand you like a pretty decent structure deck for doing like some really basic tasks. So that's all good. It is actually relatively free to play friendly. Now we get on to the question of, is this a good way to learn Yu-Gi-Oh? And the answer is complicated because Yu-Gi-Oh as a game is not very easy to learn. And I say this having played this game for a long time, and I would say being a fan of it. I'd say I drift in and out of casualdom, you know. I'm the type of person who will look up competitive stuff for a game and not really play it as much or bother to be super competitive in it. I'm in like a halfway competitive casual zone for a lot of games I play, in part because I play a lot of different games and I just can't dedicate that much time to keeping up with everything. So Yu-Gi-Oh is a weird game because okay, let me explain this. So the tutorials don't do an amazing job of actually teaching you how the game... They teach you the basics of Yu-Gi-Oh! And this is kind of a little counterintuitive, but if you teach someone the basics of Yu-Gi-Oh! It doesn't really help them that much because Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not played via the basics. There is no real... In the modern era, unless you want to go back and play some kind of legacy format like GOATS or Edison, which I would recommend, which I wish got more official support. If you're playing modern, quote-unquote, advanced format Yu-Gi-Oh!, there isn't really much of a basic bread-and-butter, honest Yu-Gi-Oh! Play. The same way that, like, yeah, Magic the Gathering has its fair share of crazy combos and gimmick decks that take over and all that. But most of the time, most of the meta, you're going to be playing with a lot of like, play a land, tap my lands for mana, put down a creature, pass turn, play a sorcery, cast an artifact, play a creature, pass. And I'm gonna attack your creature. I win. Creature goes to the graveyard. Pass to you. Like, that's the basic form of Magic. I'm gonna explain how Yu-Gi-Oh is different. So when you teach someone the basics of Yu-Gi-Oh, they can't really start playing the game because pretty much every deck fucks with the rules in some kind of way. I would say at least 2 out of 3 archetypes that you'll find fuck with the rules in that way. This is another thing. Yu-Gi-Oh is very archetype based. So rather than Magic, I'm using these as comparisons because they are the biggest card games. Pokemon is a bit of a weird comparison just because the way Pokemon is played, it's like 1 versus 1 Pokemon combat. They're different. Magic has more of what you'd call a sandbox style approach to designing cards. Cards typically exist kind of on their own. They might have synergies with other types of cards. That's obviously a thing. But generally, like, you'll pick up a card and it will do what it says, and you can theoretically put it in. Cards are fairly generic, and they're differentiated by the colors that they belong to, which kind of direct you. The different colors have different kind of play styles and identities. Maybe the colors will do the same things, but in different ways depending on what they play. Black will pay life to do something. Red will, I don't know, burn cards from the top of your deck straight to the graveyard to do the same thing, right? These are different ideas. When you look at Yu-Gi-Oh, it's more like it doesn't have like these hard like colors to separate things, but cards are designed in archetypes. They're all designed in like, there's the Cellar archetype, and you can get Cellar Taigen. And you play Taigen, and Taigen, when you summon me, allows you to search for a different Cellar card from your deck. And then that Cellar card, if you have another Cellar card on the field, you can special summon it from your hand without having to because you only get 1 normal summon per turn and all that. Cards have these synergies that are built in with other cards in the same archetype. So things are a little bit more. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna go there. It's a bit like a fighting game, in that different archetypes almost kind of play like characters from. How there's this kind of adage among Guilty Gear players that every character in Guilty Gear breaks the rules in a different way, and every character plays in a very different way. That is basically how Yu-Gi-Oh works. But what if there was like 10 billion characters, and you could swap out the little intricacies of them? Because you can switch out other cards and things like that, and it makes the game a little bit daunting. Because here's an example. So Master Duel has quite a bit of single player content, which is neat, and I've actually been enjoying going through it, because essentially the way they split it up is they have these, I don't know what you'd call it, episodes. We'll call them episodes. And the episodes all focus on different deck archetypes. Once you clear through like the initial tutorial stuff, they all focus on deck archetypes. And you have like an intro, and it's fun because it's like they work in the lore, because Yu-Gi-Oh has no central universe that all the cards exist in. The archetypes tend to like exist on their own storylines or represent their own things. Some archetypes will have storyline crossover with others. It's fun. It's like a pretty fun thing, and it allows them to have like crazy variety in what types of art styles or themes that they can go for. I love just the sheer variety in Yu-Gi-Oh archetypes. I do really love that about the game. So they, you get a little thing about the lore of these cards, and then you play like a very basic practice game that's just based around, here is kind of the main mechanic. So, okay, for instance, you play like a practice game, and then there's like a real duel that you have to win. And then when you finish that, you get another little lore thing about them, and you are given like a bunch of cards, and like you many times like a structure deck. So they give you like quite a few cards just for playing solo. So I'm going through them, and I'm playing the Demise episode. So Demise decks are based around ritual summoning. So ritual summoning is a mechanic where there are these ritual monsters, and they can only be played from your hand if you play a ritual spell. And the spells are like specific to each monster, or sometimes they will have, groups of monsters within an archetype. So the Demise cards can be summoned with this one ritual spell called End of the World. And then usually you have to sacrifice stuff on the field or from your hand that equals the level of the monster you're trying to ritual summon. You're making sacrifices to summon the monster out by playing a ritual. It's like a fun, kind of cool, very flavorful mechanic. Historically, was very weak because ritual monsters go in the main deck, and that means that you have to draw into them, and you need to. So if you draw one without the spell or the spell without the monster, they're kind of just dead cards, which is really bad in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because Yu-Gi-Oh! Has no real inherent... The inherent costs are things like you only get one normal summon per turn. That's kind of it. And it's a meaningful cost that the game is designed around, but it is, the game is essentially... That's the thing. The whole game is designed around subverting mechanics like that and doing what are called like special summons, where you can special summon as many times as you want. So you play the Demise deck, and the Demise deck is relatively straightforward. It's a pretty straightforward ritual deck. And then the next one, you unlock a couple more episodes from finishing that. And the next thing that I went to was the Megalith episode. Megaliths are another ritual archetype. The gimmick with Megaliths is that they don't have a dedicated ritual spell. Instead, you can discard any of the Megalith monsters from your hand to to use them as a ritual spell, with the same requirements of like, you have to also then sacrifice stuff that equals the level of the thing you're trying to summon, blah, blah, blah. And then when the Megalith rituals are properly ritual summoned, they usually have like effects when they hit the field. Like you can destroy a monster, you can just destroy a spell or trap, you can add something from your deck to your hand, something like that. You can revive something from the graveyard. So you do these combos. So you learn that, and it's like, oh, okay, so just like completely different. So just like the mechanic is just completely subverted. I am taught in one episode, I need a ritual and a ritual monster, a ritual spell and a ritual monster. And then I have to do this to get the monster out after I cast the spell. And then you play the next one, it's like, it's another ritual archetype. Oh, that mechanic does not matter. They completely subvert the mechanic and use it in a weird way. Now here's the thing. You can find that cool. Like, I'm sure that I'm not super into the Megalith deck specifically, but you can find that to be a cool way of playing the cards, right? A cool way of interacting with that mechanic. But it's also very overwhelming because playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And trying to learn and play different decks is a constant process of, okay, what's the new thing that I have to learn? Like, the game just functions differently because the cards don't play by the same rules. Everyone plays by different rules. And that's cool. There's a lot of aspects of it that are cool. Like, there are so many decks that play with the mechanics in these really fun ways that complement, like, the theme of the archetype and all this stuff. But as like a newer player, I can totally seeing it being very overwhelming. It's the kind of game where you can't really learn it by just, I'm going to play a bunch of cards and I'm going to swap this card out for my deck. You can't do that like you can with most other card games. This is why net decking is so popular in Yu-Gi-Oh! Honestly, the best way to learn the game is to just pick a deck. Just pick a deck and play that deck and learn how it works. Like, learn the basic mechanics and then stick with one deck and just learn the way that it flows so that you can relatively comfortably like know what your options are in any given situation. And then you can start getting into actually playing versus your opponent. So, oh my god, matchups in Yu-Gi-Oh! So, now when you can start feeling like you're really playing the game, you can get a taste for modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, which I bemoaned on a previous podcast, the same one where I talked about with Prox. And do I still stand by it? Yes. Kind of. For the most part. I think that there are a lot of very unfun play patterns and dynamics that Konami has designed the game into. There are cards that exist that aren't fun to play with, to play against, or even really to use very much. But many will argue that they have to exist just to counter the design of that the game went in throughout like the whole 2010s practically. The 2000s and the 2010s, like the direction that the game started going is kind of a game of nuke slinging. And what is the absolute strongest, most game-ending thing that you can drop in one turn, and does your opponent have the anti-nuke tech to shoot them out of the sky? So I'll give you an example. There are several decks which can, no joke, I played against a deck, some fucking synchro deck that just, it's like some like shooting Stardust or some like Stardust Dragon deck that was, no joke, comboing off for what felt like 10 minutes. It might have been less, but it was a really long time where they are just, now he's got another monster, now he's got another one, now he's got another one, he's synchroing them into another one, and now there's another one, and now there's another one. And by the end, it was like, why am I even playing? I just surrendered. What am I going to do against that? Do I draw my board clear? No. Okay, surrender. So there is a card called Max C. Max C is one of the most infamous cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Essentially, it's a monster card, but it's what's known as a hand trap. Hand traps are this thing that the game started designing where most people are probably familiar with trap cards, if at the very least by the meme. But the whole idea with a trap card was it was a card that you set face down on the field, and then after you pass the turn to your opponent, you can activate it in response to something that they do. With normal traps, you can actually just activate it at any time as long as it's not your turn, and there's an open game state. There's counter traps that specifically require it to be done in response to something. You can trigger normal traps as long as it's not the turn that you set them. So it can pass back to you and you can just flip it face up. It's just a way of designing like a little bit of slowness into the game. In fact, it's a little too slow. And a lot of traps that were traditionally very strong eventually started getting power crept out because they just, 2 turns is just too long to wait for how quickly you can fill an absolutely unstoppable board. So they started designing these hand traps, which it's a sort of colloquial name that's given to cards which can be discarded straight from the hand and which have trap-like effects. Max C is one such, and again, probably the most infamous, besides like Ash Blossom. Max C's effect is that you can discard it in response to something that your opponent does. And for the rest of the turn, every time they special summon, you draw a card. And that might not seem amazing, but in Yu-Gi-Oh, where it is pretty feasible to dump your entire hand in one turn to make an unstoppable board. Just feeding people more and more and more cards by special summoning over and over and over again is potentially turn ending. So much so that there's been a split in philosophy. Remember when I said that the different ban lists radically affect the metas of each region and each like version of the game? So in the OCG, Max C is legal at 3 copies, the maximum you can run in a deck. In the TCG, it's been banned for years. For years and years, it's been banned. In Master Duel, legal at 3 copies. And so I have 3 Max Cs that I just run in like every deck, because if you're not running Max C, it's the kind of card that sort of just has to exist. And that's a philosophical difference between the TCG and OCG. So because the OCG allows 3 copies of Max C and allows it unlimited, they design cards that in the TCG would just get banned because there's no Max C in the TCG. So there are situations where it's my turn or the opponent's first turn, and someone summons something and the other person plays just, Max C, and they just pass. Or, they set some stuff on the field, They just pass. Like, their combo's dead. It's gone. And now you're like, well, what do you do about that? Well, the answer is that you run the counters to Max C, like Called by the Grave, a quick play spell, which can target a monster in your opponent's graveyard, negate its effects, and then banish it. And then its effects are negated for the rest of the turn. So when I talk about this guy who was just synchro summoning off for 15 minutes, that's how that game started. He special summoned his first card. I play Max C. He called by the Graves my Max C in my graveyard, banishes it, negates its effect. I just lose the game. It's Jover. And what's unfortunate is that when you have a fun game, it is very fun and interactive, and you feel like you're outsmarting your opponent, and you're paying really close attention. It's cool that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a game that demands a lot of your attention from it. I think that's cool. It's hard. It's a hard game to just play like in the background, because you have to be keeping track of a lot of things. Cards have a lot of text. They have a lot of mechanics on them, which again is intimidating. But I mean, honestly, what I do is I just kind of like let them do stuff unless I have some kind of point of interaction, like a quick play or some kind of interrupt. And then I just kind of like, once they're done and it passes back to me, I just kind of like read what they have on the board. Because like half the cards they're playing are not worth learning about because they're just combo pieces to get to other cards, and they're going to be off the field in a second. That's how I play the game for my sanity. There are these games where it just kind of, the experience kind of sort of suck. And that's something that you just have to be willing to put up with, because at its most fun, the game is really fun. And it is like, I made a Guilty Gear comparison earlier. You could say Marvel versus Capcom speed and intensity, where you are just like, how do I just fuck you up and kill you in one touch? How many, oh my God, the number of just, oh, I didn't know that deck existed. Oh, it just has an OTK. Now, mind you, some of this could be due to the fact that I am not playing the most meta deck in the world. I play Cosmo. I love Cosmo. Remember when I said how much I adore the variety that you get in the different themed archetypes? Cosmo is a Star Wars Wizard of Oz parody crossover with all just references. It's no, the Yu-Gi-Oh's never really done. They don't do that shit Magic does, where it's like play Fortnite Jonesy for 5 mana. They aren't like, here's Magic does like actual like things from, they do actual crossover cards. Yu-Gi-Oh just does like parodies and stuff. So Cosmos are like, you're like, what the hell? The Wizard of Oz and Star Wars? What are you talking about? And then you start to look at the cards, and it's like Cosmo Farm Girl, who is Dorothy and Luke Skywalker, because they're both farm hands who get whisked away on big adventures. And then Cosmo Tin Can, who is the Tin Man and R2-D2. And then Cosmo Straw Man, who is the Scarecrow and C-3PO. And Cosmo Scaredy Lion, or Scared Lion, something like that, which is the Cowardly Lion and Chewbacca. And then there's the Wicked Witch, who is the Wicked Witch of the West, plus Darth Vader. And then there's the Cosmo Slip Rider, which is an X-Wing, and the Ruby Slippers, because it takes her between worlds. And you're like, why does this... Hang on. Why is he kind of spitting? And like, that's the stuff I love. And are they like in the modern day, are they a super good deck? Not really. No, they have consistency problems. Their best combo starter, Farm Girl, is a brick on turn 1. They require a lot of generic support to make it past like the incredibly powerful effects of a lot of other decks. But they do have a couple very good cards. And they have this cool idea. Essentially, the whole deal with Cosmos, so their specific gimmick is that they have 2 types of cards, of monster cards. The pilots and the ships. So the pilots are all the humanoid characters. The ships are all machines. And the idea is that each Cosmo can be banished from the field to special summon a Cosmo monster of a higher level from your hand. So the idea is literally that you're playing the pilot and then banishing them to play the ship that they're put in. And then they have all these banish pile interactions and stuff like that. Yada. And they have like some pretty decent combo potential, and they're cool and they're fun. And when I get to pull it off, like it's definitely a non-meta, fun, goofy strategy. But sometimes you get to pull some stuff off, and it's not the least viable thing in the world, and it's really fun. It's fun when I get to play the game. The second one I have is a Danger Dark World deck, which is also pretty neat. I talked earlier, I think, again on that podcast, I talked about the Danger archetype, which is one of my favorites. Again, it's the whole one that's based around cryptids, and they have this mechanic, to reiterate for anyone who forgot, because it's been a while. The deal with the dangers is that every single card is like Danger, Bigfoot, Danger, Nessie, Danger, Mothman. And the idea is you reveal them. They all have a share in effect where you reveal them to your opponent, you put them back in your hand, and then your opponent has to randomly choose a card for you to discard from your hand. If they did not choose the one that you revealed, then you get to special summon it from the hand for free. And then discard the whatever they picked. So the idea is literally you reveal the cryptid. The cryptid, there's a cryptid site. There's a Mothman sighting. And then the opponent has to try to find Mothman in your hand. And then when they fail, you literally give them a Mothman jump scare from your hand. It's so much fun. It's such a fun idea. And then every single one of them has an additional effect when they get discarded in case that happens. So the downside. So the way that dangers are usually played, they're rarely played as like a pure archetype, just because even though they do have effects when they're discarded, they just have like consistency issues. So they tend to be combined with these sort of like hybrid decks with other archetypes that have some good graveyard effects or effects that trigger when they're discarded, because no matter what, something's happening when you're discarding. So it's essentially the idea is that you are combining these two archetypes to make something that that kind of covers up for the weaknesses, gives some enablers to the discard heavy ones, and gives you less downside in case you're for your plays. Essentially, you're minimizing the downsides. So there's like a Dark Worlds, which are a discard heavy archetype that are pretty cool, and I play them with dangers, and those are like slightly more meta, you know. I'm not always terribly interested in playing the top tier stuff because at the moment that shit looks complicated. Specifically Tear Laments and Snake Eyes. Why was it? I was thinking Red Eyes. Red Eyes is a different thing. Very different thing. I don't know. And it's also just kind of like stuff that interests me. I do feel pretty free to play what I want, and the amount of variety offered in the card pool definitely complements that. But yeah, it's sort of a take it or leave it thing. You draw your own line with how much are you willing to put up with in terms of how the game is played, where I think at its worst, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a game where if you can't, quote unquote, draw the out, you just lose. If you can't draw the specific counter, you just kind of lose the game on turn one. That's like the least fun form of the game. But I think at its best, it's something where you get to play this crazy high-speed combo game that has a ton of interaction, and you actually, like, I feel really good when I have, like, okay, so my Cosmo deck, I stole it because I am not at all, I'm like, I would rather just play something that's good and not have to, so that I can still play the cards that I like, but also have, like, some real shit going on. So it's like a combined Cosmo. It's mainly, it is a Cosmo deck, but it has a bit of a Dark Hero? Fuck, is that what it's called? It's like a little Dark Hero Phoenix engine, which is essentially like a very small combo that is accessible off of the small number of cards that I run for. It's like you have to run 4 extra cards for it. And it basically just gives you access to a pretty consistent, useful extra deck monster that can destroy stuff, and it revives itself if it's destroyed, and it's like a hybrid of that. So I'm in these situations where I get like a pretty good opening hand, and I get access to my fusion spell for my Dark Hero extra deck guy, and I have like some Cosmos, and I'm like, ooh, okay. So I'm gonna start out with my Dark Hero, and I'm going to try to bait them into negating that so that I can play my Cosmos, which are my bigger combo piece. And then I do, and I feel so smart because they don't know. I'm like, ha, I outsmarted you kind of with the limited information that you have. And stuff like that is fun. It was very fun when someone took control of one of my monsters and tried to use its effect to destroy another one of my Cosmos. And the thing with all the Cosmos ships is that they can't be targeted. And they were like, oh, well, I still have to destroy something, and the only legally destroyable card on the field is the monster I just took from you. Oops. That was funny. I don't know. It's at its best, it is a very fun, unique game. And I think it's kind of interesting that I haven't seen that much. Most games, they tend to follow in the footsteps of a Magic or something like that. But few are brave enough to go into the depths that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has gone to. So would I recommend Master Duel? Yeah, I think at least to dip your toe into it. Be open to net decking. Okay, the structure decks they give you, a lot of them are really bad. I played like the Monarch structure deck because I was like, Monarchs are cool and they're also like a pretty easy deck to play. And then I went in and I bricked just 3 games in a row. Like my opening hands were completely unplayable, and I basically lost the game from there. Just like, yes, they do give you a lot of cards. I would not say that. I haven't played with all the structure decks they hand you. Apparently, the Sword Soul one is pretty good. But not all of the structure decks are like complete good decks that you can take online, even to like rookie level, like bottom tier rookie level in ranked. That's like their bottom rank. Yeah, not even. So yeah, be open to net decking a little and just kind of play one deck and sort of try to learn the game from there. And hopefully have some fun. Look, there's like a big list of all the archetypes. Just find one that you think looks kind of neat, and maybe it's good or not. Also, the episodes that they do are pretty decent intros to the archetypes and running over the basic mechanics of each of them. All the different special summoning stuff, special summoning mechanics, and everything involved with that. So, yeah. I think I would give it a recommend. The crafting system is fairly decent. Yeah. It's pretty free to play friendly. Yeah. Master Duel. Pretty good. The biggest problem with Master Duel is Yu-Gi-Oh! Itself. And now, finally, for my apology to my girlfriend for shit-talking Dandadan for 20 minutes, I'm going to talk about mouthwashing. Remember when I said that my sleep schedule was suddenly fixed? Well, that's because last night I decided around 11 p.m. when I was wide awake to play Mouthwashing, the brand new bite-sized indie horror, psychological horror game that has been tearing up the internets that a lot of people have been talking about. Kat was curious about it. I actually bought it for her. We're part of a Steam family now, so we get to do family sharing. So I technically bought it for the both of us, which is actually a very nice part of the family sharing system, is you share libraries. Mouthwashing, it takes about 3 hours, and by the time I finished it, the game was... Mouthwashing is exhausting in a good way, but it's exhausting. And when I finished it, I felt so tired, I just went to bed. I woke up at like 7 p.m. and then I like played the game and was like, I'm fucking going back to bed. And I woke up at like 5 this morning, which again is a little bit early, but is like kind of normal hours for waking up early. So thank you, Mouthwashing, for fixing my sleep schedule by being so heavy. I don't know how much of the game I want to spoil, because I think that you should go I'll give you a taste. I'll give you the first scene, because I think the first scene is a great hook. And I don't think that this really, unless you want to hear absolutely nothing about a game, I think you can stand to hear the first thing that happens. Jesus Christ. So the first thing that happens, I guess I should describe the format of the game. Mouthwashing is essentially a first-person adventure game. Yeah, that's it. That's the gameplay. It's very simple. It's very focused for what it is. It needs to pull off narratively, and I think it's solid. Pretty easy game to play. No complex mechanics. It's a single-player first-person adventure psychological horror thing. Adventure game is a weird thing because it's just sort of like a catch-all for, you kind of like move around different areas and pick up items to do little puzzles and stuff like that. I guess that's a lot of horror games, in fact. We need better genre descriptors for like the dynamics of a game. So the opening is you're on a ship. It's a cargo freighter transporting cargo through space. So we're in some kind of future time. I don't remember if they give you a year. The main characters are a small crew that mans the vessel. And when you start out, you are in the cockpit, and there's a sense of urgency. There's a sense of something being kind of off. Part of that is that you get a big alert that you are en route to crashing into an asteroid. So it says the computer's navigation tells you steer to the left, this many degrees to avoid the asteroid. And you can click on it's called the yoke, the steering wheel of like a plane or something, which I think would apply to would a spaceship use terminology for a boat or a plane? I don't know. My mind is blanking on which series prefer one or the other. The steering wheel, you can click on it, and the only option you have is to steer right. At first, I thought it was like a mistake, and I was like, "What? Did I misremember it?" They did say to steer to the left, right? No, so you click steer right, and then the computer's like, "Oh shit, we're en route to hit the asteroid for real, engaging autopilot." So you get up. You've got nothing else you can do with the control panel for the moment. You get up, and you walk around this very small little room of the cockpit, and I click on the door, and it says, "I can't let anyone in." And you're like, oh. And the only other thing that you can do is go over to the locker, where you'll find a key. There's a key slot. There's a keyhole on the panel, on the control panel. The controls, with a button, a big red button under glass. You unlock it, press the button, and it says autopilot disengaged. And you get like 0 days before the crash. So that's the opening of the game. As everything, there's some kind of like big fade to white, massive. Oh no, fuck! And then you open the door. And you're walking down this hallway that is just full. It's this cramped corridor that is like full of these posters for some like corporate mascot. You later find out is like the mascot of the company you work for, and just like stuff is just steaming and sparking everywhere, and you're going through the doors, and it just keeps going and going and going, and then you hit a dead end. You turn around, and the layout is different when you turn around, and all of a sudden, you turn around again, and there's just like this mess and maze of pipes just everywhere, and just almost caving in on you. And there's like this mascot character of like this horse. The company's called the Pony Express something. Transportation, shipping, something like that. And then fade to white, crash. So that's the opening of the game. And I think if that interests you, you should go check it out. It's fair. It's like $10 or something. So first of all, I'm recommending the game. I'm recommending it very highly. I thought this was a great, small, psychological horror experience with a really compelling story and small cast of characters. Small character-driven drama with tons of great moments, some really interesting storytelling, some really interesting little tricks here and there of stuff that I've never really seen a game do. And yeah, it's a great experience. I think it's phenomenal. 2 thumbs up. So in case anyone's like now, doesn't care about listening to, or has already played the game or whatever, doesn't mind. So the game is told out of order. You are hopping back and forth between on the timeline, learning different bits of information it's one of those games where I was thinking about it and I was like, I feel like if you put everything in order, the story would still work, but I think the way that it's told and the way that it's allowed to there is a lot of hidden information that I think as a player is really interesting, because there are things that you are playing as a character and the character knows things that you don't. And the characters know things that you don't. And so the whole sense of, I think there's a decent amount for me of the atmosphere and the tension in the game is how much it feels like you're always missing out on something, that suddenly months have gone by from the last point and you don't know if something's happened in between, and something is going on and someone's at this certain point and you'll flash forward and you're like, what the fuck, when does this, how do we get from A to B, you know? And it's not just a trick to like drag out a thin plot. It's actually used, I think, to pretty good effect to slowly feed the player information, to build up expectations and then subvert them for thematic reasons, and to create a lot of intrigue with how characters actually develop and what you think of each character. There are, I would say there's two big twists to the game. And maybe one of them I think you could have seen coming, but the other one is almost, I think, is a lot harder to see and is way crazier. I guess, should I just get into spoiling it? You've got this like tiny little cast of characters. You mainly play, so at the start, it's pretty obvious that you're playing as the captain. Who is, you later find out his name Curly. But for most of the game, you're actually playing as a guy named Jimmy. Jimmy kind of becomes the new captain. He was the co-captain, the co-pilot. And now that the main captain Curly has been put out of commission, he is like wrapped up in bandages with just this exposed eye, and he's just in constant pain. And they're just feeding him painkillers to keep him down and kind of ease his suffering. Because the crash is not critical. They're able to survive it. But things are in rough shape. They're running out of food. They're running out of power. And they are just kind of holding out for the thin hope that someone's going to come rescue them. It's honestly a little bit difficult for me to put like in order exactly what happens, because things happen out of order. Things are shown to you out of order. So for most of the game, you're playing as Jimmy, and Jimmy is such an interesting character because it's really hard to get a handle on him at the start. And the more you learn about him, the more it's really interesting to play as a character who is progressively revealed to be a really horrible person. Like a really, really bad person. Again, I guess if you just kind of want to know the story, it's revealed to you. So essentially, there's these moments where you're flashing back to before the crash, and you're playing as, in the flashbacks, you're always playing as Curly. And Curly is clearly having... It's kind of funny because like it starts off with him getting a psychological evaluation from the nurse on the ship, Anya, and he is A-okay. And she says like, yeah, Jimmy's not taking the psych evaluations very seriously. He's just kind of fucking around and it's kind of annoying me. Because it's sort of important, you know? Curly's like, I'll go talk to him. And you head to the cockpit and you open the door and it's just like a black hallway that is way longer than it really is. and you like walk down, and it turns into this massive, almost like you just walk through a door, and you're just in like this ocean of blood, and it's like the craziest hallucination ever. And then you walk through another door, and now you're just in the cockpit again. And Jimmy's just sitting there, and you're like, "Hey Jimmy, what's up? I was gonna do a psych eval from on you from Anya. Let's just have a little because I know you don't want to. You're not playing very well with her. So you're like, okay, Curly is clearly off his rocker, and then you find out there's this whole. You find out you aren't told exactly what it is at first, but you get a notification from your bosses that the company is being dissolved. They've gone under. And then there's like a little segment in between where you flash forward. And then when you flash back to Curly having to tell the crew about it, it's so hard because it's like you find out they're allowed like one party. They're allowed like one birthday party per voyage. And Curly has to like make the cake, and he's so awkward. He doesn't know what to do. And he basically tells them after you've made the cake that the company is going under and they've all been laid off. And Jimmy just rips into everyone. It is the first time he really comes off as like a real asshole, where he's that I remember at least. And he's just like ripping into like Anya's a failure. She couldn't get into med school. She's just like a fake nurse. Curly, you're always acting like you know what to do, but like, oh, you're just gonna leave us all behind because you're the captain. You're like this big. He's so spiteful. The kind of like engineers, the two engineers are Swansea, who is kind of like this older guy. And he's just, I don't remember what he has to say about Swansea, but the intern Daisuke, who's like the best character, he's my favorite guy, who's just like, he's just kind of this goof. He's like a little golden retriever, dumbass guy. And he's like, oh, Daisuke's going to be fine because he's got like his family has money or whatever. He's just a fucking idiot. And then everyone's super depressed. And you have to cut the cake. And you cut the cake by manually moving your mouse up and down. And it is like this awkward, slow, painfully awkward process because it takes so long. The sensitivity is not very high. It takes so long to cut this cake. And I was like, oh, great little, I loved that little instance of using the actual physical act of doing the thing to really put you in the shoes of how uncomfortable it is. So it's kind of making sense that Curly essentially snapped and decided to just kill everyone and was unsuccessful, and they survived the crash. You progress, things happen, you're flashing back and forth, you're finding things out about the characters. And then you find out, like when does this happen? So the biggest twist that you discover, the first twist I would say, is that Curly did not cause the crash. It was Jimmy. And I was like, oh, and maybe I could have called that. Maybe it's too obvious that was a setup or something. But I feel like when you don't know why. Essentially what you discover is that Anya has some stability problems, and she's not doing too great mentally, even before the crash. And she's having like some suicidal ideation and you go talk to her, and she says that she's pregnant. And you're like, what? You're pregnant? We've been on the ship for about 100 days, which means that the only way you could have gotten pregnant. And it's kind of obvious that the only person it could have been is Jimmy. And I actually missed this because the dialogue that I think tells you about it, that implies this, is earlier in the game. So I didn't quite make the connection, but there is a very strong implication that it wasn't consensual, and that, hey, maybe that's why Anya's feeling a little unstable. Because naturally, Jimmy is, first of all, still just an asshole, and two, refuses to take any responsibility. And so what really has actually happened is that Jimmy has some kind of, essentially, once he's confronted about it, his life is kind of over. So not only have they all lost their jobs, but he's also, I don't know what the laws are like in this future world. But he is most likely, the implication is that once he gets back and he has no job, he is also going to have to like face some kind of consequences for being a rapist. Excuse me. And you'll note, I was like, oh my God, that's so right. He's the only one on the crew who refused to take psychological evaluations. And you're like, has Jimmy also been undergoing the same kinds of hallucinations and insanity that Curly has been having but not succumbing to? There's some there's some dialogue between them that suggests that there's some similarities. So Jimmy crashed the ship. Jimmy crashed the ship to, I think, it's basically escape his problems. He was just gonna kill everyone in like essentially a murder-suicide kind of thing. And now everyone is, but pretty much everyone survived, and he has to take over responsibility as the captain. And all of these ugly, ugly parts of his personality come out. Like the way that he has this like, this real, it puts into such a different perspective how much of a fucking asshole he is, but how much responsibility he has when that's what he wanted in the first place. And second of all, he fucking caused the crash that he now has to take responsibility for. Essentially, all of the things that Jimmy blames on other people, Anya keeps asking him to do this, to give Curly his medicine. He's mad about having to take care of the stuff from the crash. He's mad about how when the crash happened, a bunch of like foam basically filled up all the holes in the ship, and it's blocking off stuff. And he's like, "Fuck, I got to deal with that, and not kill us all by opening a window to space." And it's like, you caused all of these things. Anya has this line really early on where she says that she doesn't think that people should be defined by their worst moments. And what's interesting is that when she's saying it, I kind of get the sense that she's saying it from her own perspective, and that at her lowest points, when she feels the most like just completely giving up, that she doesn't want to judge herself based off of her worst thoughts. And Jimmy basically hears that, and he internalizes that very hard in the direction of, hey man, just because I raped this woman and almost killed all of my coworkers and myself to avoid responsibility for it, that doesn't mean that I'm like a bad guy, right? That doesn't mean that I'm a bad guy. It's really interesting because you're seeing most of the game from Jimmy's perspective. And I think the story, the way that it's told, really warps around that. I think if you weren't able to like really read between the lines, it would be easy. I think it would be easy for a kind of dumb person to play the game and think that Jimmy actually wasn't that bad, because all of his like inner monologuing, and it's all from the perspective of someone who has this massive ego, who why did he rape her? I don't know. I mean it kind of fits in line. I mean, if you think about it, rape is really like, it's a power thing. It's about having power over someone else. And Jimmy expresses that in things like that. He wants to be the captain. And then suddenly he gets the power and he can't handle it. It's actually very in line with his character, when you look at it from anyone else's perspective, it's very obvious that he is like the super villain of the story, but it's not, because of the limited way that you're seeing it. It takes you a while to actually get there. The reason it's called Mouthwashing, oh man, oh my god. So the first kind of thing in the game, like the first, I would say, big, I don't know, one of the early objectives in the game is, okay, the characters are kind of stressed out because they're running out of food. They only have so much food left, and they have less food than they have power, I think was what it was. But they're carrying tons and tons of cargo, and they don't know what the cargo is. So let's see if we can try and break open the cargo hold, because it's all locked. It's all been locked down. So you go, and Jimmy goes and grabs like a pretty neat. I like the little code, the decoder ray. It's essentially like a black light that you can use on certain things in the game to reveal codes for stuff. It's neat. You open up the doors to the cargo bay, and it is this massive, just seemingly endless pallets of boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes, and everyone's like, holy shit, what's in this? And then the game cuts to what is basically like a hallucination. There's these kind of hallucination sequences where you get you're like walking through these essentially like a vision of the cargo bay, and it's just these infinite corridors of boxes, and there's a TV at the end, and you go walk up to the TV and you look through the channels, and you end on a commercial for a mouthwash that tastes great and kills 99% of germs. And then you cut back, and every single box in the cargo bay is just fucking mouthwash. And it's this crushing like moment. It is one of the most, I think, honestly, of any moment in the game, I think that might be, I'm trying to think, that might be one of the most crushing ones, because that's the moment, for me at least, because that's the moment where you feel really fucked. Because before then, there's kind of this element of, well, maybe there might be something in there. Like there could be tons of food. There could be tons of water. Who knows? And they open it up, and it's just, and Anya is reading the label and like the ingredients, and she's going, there's literally too much sugar in this crap for it to disinfect anything. It basically completely neutralizes whatever it could be as a disinfectant, whatever use it has. And as you go on and you're kind of seeing the world through Jimmy's eyes, and it feels like the world kind of starts warping, just the ship just starts getting filled with piles of bottles of mouthwash. And it's like this this like core symbol of the game. I think it's important because the game is called Mouthwashing, and I think it works on a number of levels. So first of all, there's this little thing where when you break the news about the company going under, when I think Anya says that Pony Express has been the last manned freight delivery service, like all the other ones have gone under, which implies that basically all the other ones, the whole the whole industry has been automated. And they're like the last non-automated ones, and they just got let off. So there's kind of this like, I look at the mouthwash, and it's like this corporate product that is just useless. It's useless. It's just garbage. It's like landfill waste that they have been transporting, and that of all fucking things they could have been transporting, it was crappy, useless mouthwash. There's this sense of futility and alienation I think from like this corporate mass production, how easily they were let go. Something about it. There's so much of this shit, and it's just nothing. It's just meaningless. There's also the thematic illusion, which is that mouthwash is meant to clean your mouth. It's meant to clean you. But this has so much sugar in it that the stuff you use to... It essentially like promotes more bacteria growth. Meaning that your mouth is just as dirty afterwards. And obviously you're playing a character who has done horrible, horrible things. And whatever ways he has to cope with this, that he's still a good person, you know, the metaphorical mouthwash that he can use to clean himself of all the horrible things he's done actually does nothing. He can pretend like it does, but as they discover, you know, the only thing the mouthwash is good for is just getting drunk because of the amount of ethanol in it. It's really just like alcohol. It's just running away. It's alcohol disguised as a disinfectant. And all it's really doing is running away from the bacteria, the dirt. There's another great moment in the climax. I would say that if I have any complaint about the game, it's that the climax part has a few bits that it drags a little bit. The game has quite a bit of momentum. It's very well paced for most of it. In terms of how often you're switching between different time points in time and the information that you're learning and the relatively light puzzling that you're doing. There's a couple points where the game slows down, and most of it happens towards the end. They're clearing all their bases is what's going on. They're wrapping everything up thematically. But there is like, I feel like it went a little bit long. Not bad enough to be a real complaint, but there's this, essentially the last segment of the game is Jimmy's potent extended hallucination where he is trying to make amends. Everyone is dead. Everyone is dead except for Curly, him and Curly. And he is trying to make amends. He's trying to make amends with everybody, like, in his mind spiritually. And he... There's a couple of like little maze parts that are a little bit slow, and if you get caught or you die, you just sort of have to reset. But it's a little bit, again, it's a little slow. He's making amends with everyone and taking responsibility is what keeps flashing on screen. Your objective is take responsibility. Take responsibility. Because it's the one thing that he can't really do, is take responsibility for what he's done. And it's funny because even when he's talking to these representations of characters like Swansea, he almost can't even like bring himself to do it. Like he just keeps failing. The whole part is a little bit jumbled in my mind because it is very surreal. They have the weirdest pipe puzzle I've ever seen. Oh yeah, so there's a bit where you take Curly's body from the medical bay and you bring it to the table in the lounge, and all of the characters, all of the dead characters' corpses have been placed in the chairs, and it's a recreation of the party scene from earlier. And instead of cutting the cake, you're cutting off Curly's leg. And remember how I said it's this really slow, awkward process to cut the cake? With the leg, it's even harder. You essentially have to rapidly drag the mouse up and down to make any progress. And the whole time, Curly is just moaning and squealing and gurgling in agony. And it just goes and goes. And I've it's such a cool moment because the physical act that the character is performing is the same as the motion you are making physically in the real world with your arm. And it's so long, and your arm is just getting tired, and it just you just can't cut all the way through like the bone and the muscle, and it takes so long. And as you're going, the screen just starts distorting, and the sound is just breaking apart, and just these noises of him writhing on the table. And it's so intense. And it's one of those things that's like, man, you could only do this in a video game. This is why video games are so cool. It is so immersing in the moment of what the character is feeling. It's really, really interesting. It's super cool. Is there, I don't know what I have to talk about. I mean, I don't know. It's a really, it's hard to talk because I mean, the game ends with, so there's this thing set up where Swansea, the kind of head engineer, he's very protective of the utilities closet or the utilities room. He says that it's filled up with, excuse me. He's filled up with, it's filled up with foam from the crash, and if they try to break through it, then it's going to risk, jettisoning, compromising the integrity of the ship. So he is the only one who has the expertise to be able to chop through it, and it's his own private project, essentially. And then you find out that the utilities room was practically untouched. There's like almost no foam in it at all, or there's completely, they could have gone in it. That's because utilities is where the cryopods are. There's 4 cryopods which can sustain you for 20 years, which, is it guaranteed that you can survive through that? Or that someone will come and rescue you? Not necessarily. But it's 20 years more chance. And all but one of the cryopods has been destroyed. It's been rendered dysfunctional. And you're like, oh, Swansea was basically trying to protect himself. Things happen. You end up shooting him. And eventually the one bit of reconciliation that Jimmy actually does at the very, very end, when everything's spiraled into total chaos, everyone's been killed or killed themselves, or it very gruesome, is he decides to take the only other person still alive, Curly. He takes his body and places him in the cryopod and then goes off screen and shoots himself. And it's the only way that he can that he can manage to even possibly try to apologize for what he's caused. And then the pod starts filling up with frozen air and it starts freezing over, and then the credits roll. And it's like, woof. So as I understand it, there is one alternate ending. I have not looked it up. I just finished the game last night. And it was, again, enough to make me go and just fall asleep, because I was like, man, fuck that guy. Fuck Jimmy. It's a great game. It's a really engrossing, heavy experience. If you're not in the mood for something like that, stay away. But if you can handle it, I think it's got some amazing... Oh my god, the soundscape. So I am the type of person... This is a psychological horror. There isn't much in the way of jump scares. Very, very sparse throughout the game. I actually think one of them was self-inflicted by me being a little silly. I am the type of person who, yeah, visuals can maybe get a little jump out of me, but what really, really pushes me is sound. If the sound is really overbearing, it can be, so like when I was playing Silent Hill, and, you know, Silent Hill has these moments where the soundtrack just descends into this industrial, like, orgy of just... And if there's any kind of spooky stuff happening on screen, there were moments where I had, like, playing that game, where I would have to, like, pause to, like, I have to give myself a break from the music. Because the visuals are not nearly as powerful for me, but sound really sets something off in my mind. I find sound to be a lot more potent for horror, personally. Some people are the opposite, but I am definitely like, you know, this game has a very intense soundscape sometimes, and it did reach the point where I had to, like, pause a few times and just, like, exhale because it was getting a little overwhelming for me. In a good way. Very effective for what it's trying to do, but just like, woof. The way that it builds atmosphere, so much darkness. I love the moments where you kind of realize that you'll open a door and you're like, uh-oh, we're in a hallucination. This is not how this is supposed to look. The colors are so just fill you with dread. Everything before, there's this big view screen in the lounge, and it usually plays like a sunny blue sky, and then after the crash, it's a sunset. And so much of the game is like this orange amber haze of, like, orange and shadow, and it feels so it just bears down on you. It's so suffocating at points, and just the worse that things get on the ship, it is a really claustrophobic feeling game. For one, because there's just some tight hallways, but also just tone that just descends around everything is just it. The atmosphere is so thick and oppressive, and the music is this, like, will frequently go into this distorted, heavy, weird digital noises and industrial machinery and things that you don't know what the hell that is. And it's such a down game. It's a very dour game, but to such great effect. The anything else I really want to talk about? It has these, like, is this very, like, nice, simple graphical style, kind of low poly, but very expressive characters with, like, the facial textures. The scant puzzles that are there are pretty easy, just kind of there to be doing something. I think it's fine. Kind of paces the game out. In certain cases, like the cake baking scene, it really serves to, like, drag out like the anxiety about having to tell them. Really good game, great characters. One neat thing is that there's no voice acting, except for the mascot character, which are just, like, basically just pre-recorded lines. And the fact that there's no voice acting, I was reading a couple little interpretations of a couple things, and someone pointed out that it means that you can read the same line of dialogue in a couple different ways, because depending on kind of where you place emphasis, it can have very different meanings and how the character says it. Really interesting game. I love games like this that are these tight, focused experiences that use the interactive elements to great effect, that have it has a great atmosphere, really interesting characters, very likable, or I would say engaging characters, and a really fascinating narrative and a perspective about someone who, from the perspective of someone who just cannot admit to their own faults. It's almost perfect that the game is told out of order because it takes so long. It's almost like the way that Jimmy would tell the story. Like, it would take forever for him to get around to the part where actually he did that, and actually he did this, and he did this other thing. Yeah, great game. I mean, the more I talk about it, the more things I find to appreciate. I would totally check it out. It is from a... How big is this developer? Have they done other things? Store page. This is by a dev named Wrong Organ. They have another game called How Fish Is Made. Is that Curly? Is that... I'm seeing, like, Curly in one of the Steam screenshots. Interesting. Okay, so they've got one other game from 2022, and Mouthwashing just came out. September 26th? That can't be right. September. It's November. Okay. Yes, I would totally check it out. It is $13 on Steam. I think it's well worth the money. I think it was even on sale a little while ago. I would totally check it out. Fantastic horror experience. And just as we are heading to the 3-hour mark, I think I'm going to call this a close. Call this to a close. So, yeah. Thank you so much if you have listened this far. If you have a question, feel free to leave it down in the comments below, but phrase it in the form of a question, because I'm not just going to read your thoughts out loud. I don't know if the video is going to be out before the end of the month. I don't know, man. My sleep has been weird. I have no idea how much work I've been getting done per session. Yeah, I don't know. It's soon. Like, hopefully within a week and a half. So yeah, check out the Patreon and the side channel video that I made and all that. I got nothing else. Bye.